Welcome to this Whatcom Watersheds Information Network Speaker Series event. My name is Cheryl Lovato-Niles. I am the Water Resources Educator for WSU Whatcom County Extension and a proud partner to the Whatcom Watersheds Information Network, which we call WIN for short. And tonight's event is called Dive In, Protecting Whatcom County's Lakes and Streams, Monitoring Pollution Prevention and Community Action. So I'm going to kick off by talking just briefly about some of the things we are going to talk about and some of the things we cannot cover today. We're going to focus this event on water quality, and good water quality means different things based on the circumstances and the use of the water. So there's water quality standards for drinking water, there's the quality necessary to support healthy fish and wildlife, there's water quality for growing oysters, clams, and mussels, and then there's water quality necessary for swimming and other recreational activities where you come into contact with the water. So we're not going to discuss drinking water quality tonight, but if you're interested in that topic, I highly recommend the event that we hosted in May of 2025, which is focused on drinking water, and you can find that on our website on the speakers series page. Tonight, we're going to focus on water quality in our freshwater bodies, our lakes and streams, for fish, wildlife, growing shellfish, and recreation. But since one water topic naturally flows into the other, we will inevitably touch on some additional topics. We'll hear a bit about how we assess water quality using some of the physical characteristics of water, such as the temperature, pH, dissolved oxygen, and the turbidity, which is how clear or cloudy the water is, or the amount of pollutants that are present, such as nutrients, bacteria, metals, or hydrocarbons from petroleum. We'll hear a bit about who is monitoring water quality and where. And since resources for water quality monitoring are limited, monitoring efforts are necessarily driven by specific needs and focused on specific types of pollution or parameters. And inevitably, there are some gaps in our collective monitoring work and our understanding of Whatcom County's water quality. But there is a lot that we do know, and tonight's speakers are here to provide an amazing overview of what is being monitored, what we know, efforts to protect water quality, and what community members can do to help keep our lakes and streams clean. As I mentioned, this event is being hosted by WIN, and we love getting your feedback as well as your suggestions for future events. For those of you who are online, I'll drop a link to our event evaluation into the chat. And for those of you who are in the room, there is a paper evaluation on your tables. And we know you're busy, so we keep these really short, but please do consider sharing your thoughts with us. Tonight, we're going to hear from our presenters in a series of back-to-back presentations, and then we're going to finish the evening with time for you to ask questions of any or all of them. If you are joining us via Zoom, please keep your microphone muted during the presentations. When we get to questions, you can feel free to either enter your question into the chat or raise your hand using the Zoom button at the bottom of the screen if you'd like to ask your question in person. So tonight, our speakers are Ingrid Enschede, who is the Senior Water Quality Planner with Whatcom County Natural Resources. She's going to talk about fecal coliform, describing what is it, why do we care, how do we monitor for it, and what's the current status. Then we'll hear from Kirsten, McDade, and Zoe Fry with resources, and they're going to share their story about following PFAS up Squalicum Creek. PFAS are often referred to as forever chemicals. James Kardouni, who's the water quality TMDL lead for Washington Department of Ecology, will discuss Ecology's water quality assessments and how they inform the watershed planning process, as well as ways for the public to be engaged. Regrettably, Johan Mesquita, the Assistant Director for the City of Bellingham Natural Resources, is not able to join us tonight. Ingrid Enschede will briefly touch on the impacts of development on stormwater and surface water, those lakes and streams, and the work that larger cities and the county do to reduce the harm from stormwater. And then we'll finish it off tonight with Alexi Guddal, who's the Education and Outreach Manager from Whatcom Conservation District, who will share the many ways that individuals can help to protect our lakes and streams. And with that, I will turn it over to Ingrid.
Okay, thank you, Cheryl. Thank you, everyone joining us in person and on Zoom. Happy to be here. My name is Ingrid Enschede, and I work with community members like you to keep fecal bacteria pollution out of our surface waters, draining via lakes or via ditches, creeks, lakes, and down to the marine water. I work with a team at Whatcom County Public Works Natural Resources. We run a fecal bacteria pollution water quality program and pollution monitoring program, and we work with Whatcom Clean Water Program partners throughout all of Whatcom County, and we work together in that partnership, again, looking at keeping fecal pollution out of surface waters with the overall goal of protecting public health and protecting and restoring shellfish growing in Whatcom County. So that Whatcom Clean Water Program larger partnership includes cities of Linden and Ferndale, the Whatcom Conservation District, and we have state partners and federal partners and the Nooksack Indian Tribe and Lummi Nation. So our work really focuses, like I said, on fecal bacteria pollution, measuring it, reducing it to keep public health safe and restore and protect shellfish harvesting in Whatcom County. So what are fecal coliform bacteria? I had to double check this. They're a group, so this very large group, bigger than a genus, a type of bacteria that grow in the intestinal tracts of warm-blooded animals. There's a subset, a small portion can also be found in plants. So it's not 100% fecal bacteria equals poop in the water, but it's used as an indication that the more fecal bacteria we have in the water, the greater the likelihood that sewage, animal manure, any sort of feces mixed in the water, and there's potentially pathogens from then, like viruses and other bacteria that might make you sick in the water. So E. coli is a type of, for example, E. coli is a type of fecal coliform bacteria that we measure and we know can make people sick. Why do we care? Well, because it makes people sick, right? So it's associated with those viruses and bacteria that can cause all sorts of illnesses. Obviously, we don't want people to get sick. I was a child that grew up playing in my local creek. We don't want our children or anybody playing in the creek or the beaches to get sick. And we want to be able to eat, the shellfish, the fish, the things, the beautiful food that grows in our natural environment. We want all that to be safe and free of pathogens that are going to make us sick. So we care that way. Specific to shellfish growing areas in Whatcom County, fecal coliform levels are used to set safety standards for shellfish safety. So when the bacteria levels are too high, that's an indication, and the State Department of Health will come in and monitor that, and they'll regulate it, and they will shut shellfish growing areas down if the risk of illness is too high from increased fecal pollution. So our program is really focused and driven around restoring and protecting shellfish harvest. It's a loss to the tribes of their traditional to harvest in their usual and accustomed areas. It's a huge hit to everyone in our community that likes to go clamming, and it's a big commercial hit to our commercial shellfish industry. There's currently about 1,600 acres of shellfish growing area tidelands in Whatcom County that are closed to shellfish harvest due to fecal pollution. And that's either year round or some of it is part of the year. So how do we monitor? It's real old school. A person goes out in the field with a bottle, a sterile bottle, and a pole, and you do something called a grab sample. You grab it out of the water. We follow procedures to make sure we're not contaminating that sample, put it in a cooler, take it to an accredited lab. They filter it, put it on a petri dish, and count the number of colonies that grow. So the units of measurement are colonies or colony forming units per 100 milliliters of water. I'm going to touch briefly on the marine water quality that happens here in Whatcom County. So this is really a state-led effort with some local support and supplementing of that work. The state monitors in all shellfish growing areas, and I have a map coming up, but all areas are at least every other month or 6 times a year. And then we have priority areas, which are Drayton Harbor, Lummi Bay, and Portage Bay. Lummi and Portage Bay are on the Lummi Indian Reservation. And if you're not familiar, Portage Bay receives all of the water from the Nooksack River. So it's essence the mouth of the Nooksack River. So those are monitored once a month or 12 times a year. And I want to give a quick nod to the beach program, which is a super cool program if you like to swim in beaches, in marine beaches in the summertime. So that's a State Department of Health and Ecology led program where they partner with local health agencies and they monitor every 1 or 2 weeks in popular swimming beaches. There's about 5 of them here in Whatcom County. And then they have a program to like post the beach and get the word out if there's unsafe bacteria levels for swimming. So here's a map of our shellfish, the commercial shellfish growing areas, which really is every place that you could viably grow shellfish in Whatcom County. So we'll see if this works as a pointer. But the main ones that we focus on, like the big ones, are Drayton Harbor, Birch Bay, Lummi Bay, and Portage Bay. And then the colorful watersheds here are all of the watersheds that drain to those areas. And then there's smaller ones on Eliza Island, Chuckanut Bay, Lummi Island, and Alden Bank out here. So these are the areas where the marine water quality monitoring is happening. So then I'm going to talk briefly about freshwater monitoring. So generally speaking, this is locally led. That's where most of the sampling happens. James is going to talk about what the state's doing as well. We do get plenty of state support and help in this work. The main organizations conducting freshwater quality monitoring are Lummi Nation, Nooksack Indian Tribe, Whatcom County. Resources will also speak to what they're doing as well. So apologies if I've left anyone else out. But those are, in our work with bacteria, those are the main body groups that are sampling. And our program in Whatcom County, we focus on those primary shellfish growing area watersheds, Drayton, Birch Bay, Portage Bay, and Lummi Bay. We have about 200 sites that are sampled once or twice a month. And this is just to kind of give you a snapshot view of the breadth and distribution of our sampling efforts. So you'll notice there's a concentration around Birch Bay and Drayton Harbor, around like that Linden kind of Blaine, Ferndale area, and then they become, at the further you go up the Nooksack River watershed, the more dispersed and less dense our network of sampling sites. How am I doing on time?
You're at 4 minutes.
Okay, speeding it up. So to wrap it up, I'm going to talk about the water quality status when it comes to bacteria pollution and where you can go online to dig into the details and look at the data yourself. So the marine water quality bacteria, all that data is housed and managed by the State Department of Health. They have, my next slide will have a link, but they have this cool online shellfish growing area map. And this is zoomed into Whatcom County. And there's two ways that they're classifying the marine water quality. So they're classifying, looking at the last 30 samples, so a few years worth of data, and they're generally classifying shellfish growing areas as good to go. That's green. Yellow is good to go some of the time, and red is prohibited all of the time. And I'm going to have a little bit more information on other resources available online. But big picture, our marine water quality status, Birch Bay and Lummi Bay are meeting the water quality standards for shellfish harvest, which is a very high standard. And then Portage Bay and Drayton Harbor, it's a mix of meeting and not meeting. And those are our priority areas where we're trying to get improvements. Freshwater, if you want to get into the details of this map, we have copies of the Whatcom Clean Water Program annual report available here and online. But this is a general snapshot showing the main watersheds where we're collecting fecal bacteria pollution fecal bacteria data. The color coding is for the last year, 2025. So blue is, meeting health benchmarks. Red is not meeting either, and this yellow is partially. And then we have a trend analysis for all of the data that we've collected so far is, with these arrows. So the good news is a down arrow means the concentrations are declining. That's improving. The dashed line means it's staying the same, and yellow or the circle's not enough data. Okay, I got to move it on. So where to go for more information? So these are going to be added to the chat later on. Thank you, Haley. So if you want to dig deep into the marine water quality status, you could Google State Department of Health, like shellfish growing areas. You'll find this link. You have access to beach closures, recreational safety nets. You'll be able to access what they call their annual reports for each growing area, which you can get into more of the details for the specific data and the status for each monitoring site. They have biotoxin, red tide warnings, all sorts of good stuff here. And this is my last slide for fresh water quality status. We maintain a site at Whatcom County Public Works. This is the link here. You can do a deep dive. There's an interactive water quality map where you can see within about 3 days, all of the most current data gets posted. There's a cool data dashboard you can play around with. And we also have monitoring reports, water quality monitoring reports or summaries that have the last 13 months of data and some beautiful charts that show how the data compares to the old fecal bacteria standards. So with that, I'm out of time and I'm going to wrap it up and we'll have questions later.
Could you go back one slide? I didn't get the whole link.
Oh, we'll have the link in the, oh, sorry, you're right. Yes, that's a good point.
Here. There.
100 meetings are the
Yes.
most.
If you Google DOH shellfish growing, it should come up. Or shellfish growing areas, Washington State Department of Health. You should be able to find it pretty easily. And if you Google Whatcom County Public Works water quality, you should be able to find, hopefully, our page. Thank you.
All right, we are here to talk about the work we have done monitoring PFAS in Whatcom Creek. My name is Kirsten McDade. I'm the North Sound Waterkeeper, and my colleague here, Zoe Fry, is the program coordinator, and we both work for Resources, which is an environmental nonprofit located in Bellingham, actually just a few blocks down the street. Some of you might know us better for the Restore. We are actually the same organization, and we have this vision for a climate resilient Northwest Washington, and we have 3 kind of buckets of work that we do, protecting the Salish Sea, kind of the water quality work, clean energy, transition from fossil fuels, healthy watersheds, focusing on ecological forestry. And in all of those buckets of work, we engage the community, give them tools to help envision this vision, so to speak.
So before we jump into the story of PFAS in Whatcom Creek, I want to start by what is PFAS? So PFAS are per and polyfluoral alkyl substances, which can also be known as or referenced as forever chemicals. So PFAS are very hazardous to human health. And this is even in small amounts, parts per trillion, which is a couple drops in an Olympic-sized swimming pool. PFAS are resistant to breaking down. That carbon-fluorine bond is really strong, so they stay in the environment for thousands of years and can even bioaccumulate in organisms. PFAS are found all over the planet, from the Arctic to our drinking water to the air that we breathe, and even in us. They've been found in our human tissue and breast milk. So where do PFAS come from? We can find PFAS quite literally everywhere in everyday objects like waterproof clothing, nonstick cookware, and even personal care products like makeup or shampoos. But we also see them in industrial uses, like in aqueous film forming foam or AFFF, firefighting foam, and even pesticides as well. So while we don't have any PFAS manufacturers in Washington state, we do have industries that use PFAS in Washington state, like fire training centers, airports, paper manufacturers, and even food packaging. And there are a lot of PFAS. There are over 9,000 types or analytes of PFAS that have been manufactured. So to give you a brief history of PFAS, PFAS began to be manufactured in the 1930s. And it was in the 1970s that we started to see the first evidence of adverse health effects on ourselves and the environment due to PFAS. In 2009, the EPA released Method 537 to test for PFAS. And since then, we've seen an increase in testing methods for PFAS and more confidence in our testing. And with that increase of testing, we've seen an increase in regulations. It started with regulations specifically of PFAS in drinking water. And in around 2022, the Ecology published a PFAS chemical action plan. And in the past couple years, we've seen more regulation for PFAS, not just in drinking water, but in surface water, groundwater, and soil as well.
Our work with PFAS really began in 2022. Through our connection with the Waterkeeper Alliance, we were connected with a professor in the University of Florida who was doing a study that was looking at the amount of PFAS found in creek foam. And so he sent out an email, hey, do you know of a creek that happens to have foam? And incidentally, I had been noticing over the last few years that Squalicum Creek at Cornwall Park had a lot of foam. And so we went to that area, and Squalicum Creek, the watershed here, to orient you, north of the watershed is like the Bellis Fair Mall. South of it is downtown Bellingham. So we went to Cornwall Park, and maybe some of you have been there. I've spent a lot of time with my children playing there. Between the two bridges, pedestrian bridges, there's a series of little waterfalls. At the bottom of the waterfalls, foam collects, as you can see in this picture. So we went with a stainless steel spoon and grabbed the foam, put it in a Ziploc baggie, grabbed some surface water right next to it, also put it in a Ziploc baggie, sent it back to Florida. A few months later, we get an email from the professor, and he says, what's up with Squalicum Creek? Literally, because he said the levels are astonishingly high, some of the highest in his entire national study. So the foam had over 31,000 parts per trillion, the surface water 360 parts per trillion. What does that mean? You know, drops in a swimming pool. Not a lot, but the typical amount an urban stream has in Washington state is 20 to 30. So we're looking at over 1,000 times more PFAS found in the foam, over 12,000 times the amount found in the surface water. So very high. And this suggests a point source of PFAS, not just little bits coming from maybe a little bit of pesticides or a little bit of car washing detergent or something, but a point source.
So in 2023, after getting that shockingly high amount of PFAS result, we wanted to start a PFAS monitoring program to figure out where PFAS is, how much PFAS there is. So we created this program that's centered around the first fall flush event. So after the dry season through the summer, when there's that first big rain, more than half an inch of rain that falls in a 24-hour period, we would go out and conduct PFAS monitoring using cyclopure kits, which are featured in this bottom corner. So we started with 11 sites, our 10 stormwater sites that are along Inner Bellingham Bay, and then the one site at Squalicum Creek at Cornwall Park. So since 2023, we've conducted our annual PFAS monitoring since then, 2024 and 2025, and we will conduct it in 2026, but so far we've just done one sample. So we started with those 11 sites, mainly along Inner Bellingham Bay. So this is 2023. And then, as you can see, we decided to go up the watershed, add more sites each year to see where PFAS spikes could be in the Squalicum Creek watershed. So here's 2024. You can see a really big spike at Squalicum Creek at Hannigan. Yeah, really lots of PFAS. And then in 2025, we're still seeing elevated levels of PFAS, particularly up the watershed of Squalicum Creek in the Iron Gate industrial area. And there's 2026, not a huge bar, but at Squalicum Creek at Cornwall Park.
So looking at that data, we noticed that the further up the creek we were sampling, the higher it got. We kind of thought we had gotten that Squalicum Creek or at Cornwall Park was the high point, but we the next year we got another high rating and we went further up. But finally in 2025, we went so high up the water, into the watershed that the levels dipped down. So went to those kind of low levels. And so we kind of found in this purple circle area, the site below it was very high, but the 3 samples up the stream, up Toad Creek and Squalicum were back down to being low. So we are figuring if there is a point source, it's likely to be within this purple circle here. So then the next slide, I'm going to focus in on that purple circle. We're trying to figure out, well, what could be the source of this PFAS? So we've kind of highlighted 3 potential areas. There's a fire training facility on Britton Loop Road that has a history of using AFFF foam. So that's one of the spots we're looking at, and we have connected with that fire training facility. There also, when we talked to them, they mentioned there was a house fire here, a full-blown house fire, total destruction. They don't know offhand if AFFF foam was used to fight that fire. We're trying to find that information. And then this is the Iron Gate Industrial Park here. There are a variety of industries there that have industrial class codes that suggest that they could be using PFAS. So that could be another source of the contamination. Another kind of clue, this is like a mystery project here. When we sent our data into the Department of Ecology, we worked with someone in the PFAS Chemical Action Plan, and they noticed that our data suggests that it could also be AFFF foam because 4 of the main spots, the ones that are highlighted here, are kind of a fingerprint of AFFF foam. So 4 of the 4 types of PFAS that are found in firefighting foam were all elevated in those Squalicum Creek samples. And then this is the kind of the data that we have over time. The University of Florida sample is much higher than we have sampled since. So it was that point source, did it happen 2022 and earlier and we're seeing it decline? We're not exactly sure. Even though these sources in 2023, 24, 25 and on look a lot smaller, I do want to state that the Ecology sample in 2025, this is one sample that they took out of 40 in the entire state, and this sample was their highest in the amount of PFAS. So even though it looks small on this graph, it was considerably high. I also want to say that the 3 different colors, 3 different organizations, 3 different methodologies. So there's a lot of variability here to work with. The lines aren't quite lining up here. The drinking water, the arrow kind of shifted down here. The drinking water standard for PFAS is 4 parts per trillion, so a really small amount. The point here is that Squalicum Creek is not a source of drinking water. However, I know my dog drinks or used to drink a lot out of that creek. Kids swimming in it potentially could drink. There are some homeless camps along that creek, so that is something to consider. The other thing is the protection of aquatic life is the federal standard is set at 250 parts per trillion. So that means the levels that we're getting, at least in the surface water, is below that. So that means that At this point, what we know about PFAS is potentially not harming the critters in the creek. If we add the, that's the state level, it's much higher. If we add the foam data, though, it dwarfs all of the other data that we collected. And this data suggests that the foam, if it came in contact with aquatic life, could have hazardous effects.
So I know we're almost at time, so this is our second to last slide here, but over the course of our monitoring efforts, we have been in communication with agencies at a county, city, and state level. So we've been in communication with the city of Bellingham, who have mentioned they hope to do further PFAS testing in the Squalicum Creek watershed to see if they can locate a point source of PFAS. We've also been in communication with the county health department and the state health department to try to get signage up at Cornwall Park, specifically alerting folks to not drink from Squalicum Creek because they could have adverse health effects with the PFAS concentration there. And if they do swim in the foam or the surface water, to make sure to rinse off with fresh water afterwards. We've been in communication with Fire Station District 4, Station 12. They've provided us access to their site for PFAS sampling and information on AFFF usage and storage history. And finally, we've been in communication with the Department of Ecology on a number of fronts, one being PFAS testing. So through the Chemical Action Plan, they have been doing that statewide PFAS study. And Squalicum Creek at Cornwall Park is one of the sites that they included after they saw what we've been doing and the results that we have been seeing. Additionally, we hope to continue our work with Ecology to get insight on where and how to further our testing with PFAS in Squalicum Creek watershed to hopefully limit or hone in on a site that can be listed in the Model Toxic Control Act or contaminated site list, so that Ecology can develop a plan to remediate that site from PFAS pollution.
And that's it. Thanks for listening. We've got our email address there that are partially blocked, but feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions, or we'll address them later on too. Thanks.
Again.
Yeah.
Thank you. That was excellent and lightning round. Here we go. Number 3. I'm just going to put on the laser pointer, so I might use it. Hello, everyone. I'm James Kardouni with the Washington State Department of Ecology. I work with the water quality program based out of the Bellingham field office, and talk a little bit about some of the additional monitoring going on locally and what we do with those data, and how the public can be involved in some processes or some steps along the way. I'll start with Department of Ecology's programs, and then this is just kind of an overview, table of contents, and then the rest follow up. So our mission is to protect and preserve and enhance Washington's environment. I'm showing you 10 core programs of our state agency. Today, I'm going to focus on our environmental assessment program and the water quality program, and with an emphasis on the data collection and the assessment. And these are all hyperlinks. They're embedded in there somewhere, but that's just as a heads up. Got a lot of. Okay, so back our environmental assessment program. We work, and the water quality program, we're primarily collecting water quality samples, and mostly our environmental assessment program. So we coordinate a bit on the studies and why we do it. We want to know kind of the long term, what's going on. That's our ambient monitoring. The agency was created in just before the EPA was, I think either it was late 1969 or early 1970. And so I think roughly in our local watersheds, like the Nooksack, around 1970s, early 70s, 78, we started to collect data. And I'll show you a map later on. So we do that for the long term, and we have some short term type of sampling. And these help us inform some unique studies as we collect data. Some of the studies we'll design for a watershed improvement. I'll get into some details of those. And And we also want to know how, if we create a watershed plan, how effective that plan's going. So we might do some follow-up sampling. We also do research like the PFAS work. And then watershed health is kind of like an ambient monitoring, different types of data collected there. And we do a lot of these statewide, actually all of it. So this is a map. It's showing locally, we call them watershed resource inventory areas. And this is inventory area 1, RIA, or WIRA, however you want to get the acronym, but it's the Nooksack, and some of this water kind of is outlined. Some of it's flowing into the Nooksack, some of it doesn't. But these pink dots are where water quality samples have been collected in freshwater, surface waters, not groundwater, and it's not showing the marine water here. And some of these samples have been a one-time sample. Some of them have been those long-term samples. So thousands of sampling locations. And the dots represent federal, state, and local data. And we have a database. Here's a hyperlink. We call it the Environmental Information Management System. These data go into that database. Ecology works on that database, administers it. There are also national databases as well, the Water Quality Portal, USGS. But USGS feeds into the Water Quality Portal as well as EPA that kind of run that. And so local data, I know the Nooksack tribe, for example, they put their data into the Water Quality Portal, and other local jurisdictions put their data into it as well. So once we have the data, we have some water quality standards. Some of them were alluded to, Ingrid and resource folks alluded to those. We compare the data to our standards and we do a water quality assessment. And this is a map now. It's the same watershed area and the different colors. When we do this assessment, we come up with these categories, and I'll explain what they are. But just kind of, I am showing the marine ones. I didn't filter those out, but we have a lot of these other red lines here throughout our watershed, and we have some green ones. So what does that mean? So for our water quality assessment, Ecology is conducting this assessment, and we're comparing them again to the water quality standards. Green means we're good to go. We have enough data to say that we are meeting our standards, and the standards are designed to protect aquatic life and human health. Areas in the yellow, there's a few, they're really hard to see because it's a small map, but we have some data that they might have an issue with those sampling locations based on the data, but we can't really say, oh, it's meeting standards or give it any other category. So more data needed. 3 is not depicted, we just don't have data. And 4, we have enough data to show that's impaired, but it has a plan. So that's that watershed plan. And there's 3 different varieties, the category A, B, and C, where the goal of these plans are to, I'll kind of step through one example. These are, again, high-level overview of this assessment and what we do with it. But category 5 is when we have to develop these plans. There's regulations and laws that we develop these plans for. So this really, when we do have category 5, it's an impairment. It's on the 303D list. This is why we developed these total maximum daily loads or a pollution control plan. Let's see here. So if we think of this map and the different categories, here we're just focusing on the green ones. And I took just the freshwater and put it on this total count here, this plot. So when we look at this, what this is telling us is we've sampled all these freshwater areas, and 80 of those sites do meet the water quality standards for toxics. And toxics, I've lumped in a bunch of different types of toxics here, and it's usually human health and aquatic health is part of those standards. And then we see it kind of tapers off we see bacteria, we're kind of meeting it. And Ingrid mentioned bacteria. And on the flip side, this is our impaired or the polluted. That's that category 5 through 3D listed. That kind of triggers our watershed planning process. We do see a lot of bacteria issues. So the samples are telling us that we're not quite meeting the water quality standards. And this could be by virtue of the amount of the frequency we're sampling bacteria, or that it is a problem. We don't really know. And then dissolved oxygen, that's the DO. These are other issues, and they start to taper off with different types of parameters. And so what of the areas, this final chart here just shows total maximum daily loads, the TMDL. That's kind of work on those, implementing them, developing them. We mostly in our watershed for freshwater, we mostly have pollution control plans that address bacteria. So at least we're addressing one of the larger impairments. And then temperature, dissolved oxygen, and we don't really have them for toxics. That's a whole nother story. The Model Toxics Control Act, we have different plans that develop, but this doesn't encompass that at all. So just keep that in mind. And so these plans, just a quick overview, the goal is to attain the total maximum daily load, which is a loading, but the water quality standards are primarily concentration based. So either one, if kind of these plans help us understand where the pollution problems are, and the goal is to meet those water quality standards. So one step of this, or one component of these plans, are to characterize the land cover and land use, and that helps us identify pollution sources and potential cleanup strategies and pathways to doing that. Also, these plans describe roles and responsibilities for the public, for local agencies, federal, state agencies, and identifies funding opportunities, not just what ecology funds, quite a bit of opportunities there, and different organizations that administer those funds. Recommends priorities and timelines, and it also suggests ways to track progress, and it may incorporate the 9 elements of a watershed plan. And parts, so my final part of this presentation is where can the public be involved? We do webinars, Ecology hosts webinars, and there's always public comment periods on on these plans. So that's one step. You can sign up for a listserv here. I think this might be covering it up, but there's a, if you want to be informed.
Like this little hide. Do you see the little?
Oh yeah, let's hide
I
that.
wonder what happens if we.
Okay. So yeah, there's this is, if you want embedded there, you can sign up and get these. You get the information on. Okay, so the non-point pollution plans. It's a statewide plan, kind of broadly speaking, but it feeds into addressing these pollution sources. You can comment on those. Our water quality standards. We have rulemaking, things like that, and what are the standards and why. It's science-based, fact-based. Our water quality assessment, as I shared with you, we have cyclical reviews of that, usually every 2 years. That's open for public comment. And then permits, Ecology administers a lot of permits, and there's cyclical renewal periods. Every permit has a public comment period for the permits. And then my final slide here is another component of public participation is reporting. So there's an online form, we call it our environmental reporting and tracking system, and it helps coordinate a response to pollution if you see that. So you can email us, come in person to the office, phone us, and we're looking for these types. If you see these types of issues like a spill and this type of information. And that is my final slide. Our office is right along Squalicum Creek. So thank you.
Quick question. For those of us who made the mistake of showing up in person and don't get access to all the fun links that the Zoom participants get, will this be made available, all the slides be made available?
Yeah, well, I'll have to check in with all of the presenters whether or not it's okay to share the slides. It sounded like yes, I'm saying yes. Okay, so I can do that. Yeah. So folks who registered, I have your email address. And if you didn't register, see me and you want the slides, see me and figure it out. All right. Ingrid, this is when Johan would have
Okay.
presented.
Okay. So no? Oh, you took the slides out already.
He didn't say.
Oh, I didn't send any slides. Okay.
Yeah.
So don't, maybe I'll just stop sharing briefly or, no, I'll just leave it. So, so again, my name is Ingrid and I've worn different hats over the years, my tenure at Whatcom County. And so I'm stepping in to just speak a little bit since City of Bellingham staff couldn't be here to kind of represent the work that cities are doing in our urban developed areas to monitor for, water pollution and do work to keep stormwater runoff clean. I'm just going to hit a couple highlights in sort of what's happening in our communities here in Whatcom County around stormwater management and stormwater pollution from urban areas. So urban areas generally are cities and densely developed portions of Whatcom County outside of city limits. And no surprise if you cut down the trees and you replace it with buildings and parking lots and, subdivisions, whatnot, you see real impacts to both water quantity, so the flash flooding and, a lot more water flowing off, and then it picks up a wide variety of pollutions, the PFAS, the dog poop, the heavy metals, et cetera. So there's not surprising when we have developed areas, all of the runoff, we call it stormwater runoff off the developed areas, tends to be quite polluted. So the Federal Clean Water Act has a component of that addresses management of these non-point source pollutions in urban areas, and that gets passed down to State Department of Ecology. Ecology manages something called a municipal stormwater permit, one of the many permits that James was talking about that you can, there would be a public process to involved in that permit as well. But here in Whatcom County, the city of Bellingham, cities of Linden and Ferndale, and Whatcom County, generally the urban growth areas or the urbanized areas of Whatcom County, they all have a Washington State municipal stormwater permit. And generally speaking, that requires those jurisdictions to have a stormwater management program. And that includes things like education and outreach to community members about what they can do to keep water clean. It involves mapping and tracking and understanding all the stormwater infrastructure. So the ditches and the catch basins and all of those pipes that go out to the creek, we call those outfalls. It involves how those governments operate. So like they're operating a truck or they're, there's a spill, they're responsible for spill prevention and operating government business in ways that don't create pollution. It includes things like development permits. How do those cities regulate or county regulate building permits such that you can't have dirty, polluted runoff from a building site, things like that. There's a tiny bit of a monitoring component. It's very small. The permittees have the option to either do their own monitoring or pay into a fund where the State Department of Ecology does some monitoring around the urban runoff. So Alexi is going to talk a little bit more about like things people can do in the city and in the county, like outside of urban areas. There's a lot of those, like what people can do and how to keep stormwater clean translates whether you're in a city, in a developed area or not. But it is a real concern, right? The water quality coming off our urban areas is a concern. I know City of Bellingham does a lot above and beyond what just they're required to with their permit. And unfortunately, they're not here to talk about it tonight. But I think that's about it. I have it for kind of a pitch hit for a high level urban areas. It's a thing.
Well done.
And now we know not to eat the phone. Yeah, I'm really very traumatized.
Hi, everyone. I'm Alexi Guddal. I'm the Education and Outreach Specialist for Whatcom Conservation District, which I'll refer to as Whatcom CD probably throughout the presentation. And as Ingrid mentioned, I'm going to really focus in on what we do as community members, or what we can do as community members across our waterways to help minimize and prevent water quality pollution. And a lot of that is going to focus on fecal coliform and stormwater because that's what we speak the most about at the Conservation District currently. All right, so Whatcom Conservation District, why am I the one talking about this? We're your land and water partner. So we work with communities and organizations to help support, oh, I don't have access to my notes. I was gonna read that off. Okay, yep. We're a water partner, and we have a variety of resources to help individuals as well as organizations implement conservation practices. And so we are non-regulatory, we're confidential, most of our services are free or at cost, and we really just want to connect people with the resources that can help minimize barriers to implementing conservation practices. And part of that is that taking care of Whatcom County is a team effort. So this is me and some of the staff at the CD. And that team effort is kind of part of all of us. So as we're looking at all of these cumulative pollution issues, we also can have good collective impact. So water flows downhill. We have a myriad of water here in Whatcom County. I mean, our county is named after the Lummi Nation word for noisy waters. And all of that water can pick up all of these different pollutants that we've talked about today, but our actions can also help improve that water quality too. And so this is an example. It's one of my favorite events that we host, near and dear to my heart, Orca Recovery Day. And since 2018, the actions of individual people working together have resulted in 134 acres restored, 90,000 pounds of trash removed, and 54,000 native trees and shrubs planted. And that's just one day a year with people working together. And so if we start implementing actions into our everyday life, that can have a collective impact for the good as well. And so I'm going to talk about a lot of different actions that can help improve water quality. Each of these topics could probably be a presentation in and of themselves, and I'm not going to cover everything. So I'm going to do my best to stay within our time. And if you have questions, I'll have my contact info at the end. Please feel free to reach out. So picking up pet waste. We love our furry friends, but they create poop. And it's really important that we pick up after them both at home and wherever we're going. So this statistic was staggering to me, that there's over 18 million pounds of poop per year in Whatcom County alone coming from pets. And a lot of that is in concentrated urban settings. So, and a lot of that poop also carries more pathogens that are human infectious. And due to dogs' diet, it doesn't break down readily in the environment. It can stick around a little bit longer. And so picking up after our pets is one simple way that we can help reduce fecal coliform bacteria pollution, as well as too many nutrients in the water that can then lead to things like harmful algae blooms, which we didn't even touch on today. But one simple action. Maintaining our vehicles. We're all probably familiar with the rainbow sheen in parking lots. I love this picture here because it illustrates that oil going directly into a storm drain. Ingrid touched on storm drains briefly. All of these grates that we're seeing on our streets and parking lots, those generally are not filtered before they go into our local streams, from those streams into our local rivers, and then out into our bays. And so they carry all of those harmful chemicals and pollutants that are toxic to salmon and to us with them as they're going in. I know we're all familiar with the impact that oils can have on wildlife when it's on really large concentrated scales, when there's big spills, but even these little spills can be detrimental. And then in the last several years, there's been a lot of research that the particles in tires that help them. Some of the particles in tires are extremely toxic to salmon. And so keeping our tires inflated and aligned is another way that we can help reduce that specific toxic going into the water. So there's these cute little reminders of don't drip and drive and don't wait to inflate to help us remember to do these actions. And there's resources, which I have, I'll have my coworker Annika linking online, and then they're embedded in the PowerPoint that you can look at as well in the notes section. To different at-home procedures you can do to test for some of these things too, because keeping your vehicle maintained can be a costly barrier. And there's some ways to check and see and make sure, am I leaking or not, without having to go through that payment process. Okay, properly disposing of waste. Very broad umbrella. But whether it's something that's a hazardous material like fertilizers or paint or batteries, or something as simple as trash, all of that can have a detrimental impact. So think about the actions that you're doing and where you're doing them. This picture there is from our annual 5th of July beach cleanup, where we clean up all of the fireworks trash after the 4th of July. And I'll be talking about that a little bit more later. But where you're leaving waste and how you're leaving waste, whether it's in the dark or for an event or fun, can have a detrimental impact. Making sure that your trash is secured, making sure that if you have hazardous waste that could leak out of your trash can, that you're disposing of it properly. And Whatcom County has hazardous waste disposal areas. And then thinking about, too, hazardous chemicals when you're implementing them. So I included the fertilizer here because fertilizer is one of those things that if it's applied improperly, so like right before a rainstorm, or if you're using more than you need to, then a lot of that is going to be picked up by water and carried again into your nearest stream or river, connecting then down to the bay. And that is another source of things like harmful algae blooms when there's more fertilizer in the water. All right, saving water. This is probably less intuitive than some of the other topics I've covered, but I really wanted to include it because we're projected to have a pretty severe drought this summer. And lower levels of water means that there's higher concentrations of contaminants in that water. So, you know, that swimming pool analogy that you're talking about, when you have less than a swimming pool, but the same amount going in, then you're more likely to come in contact with it. And so we work with the Whatcom Water Alliance, which is a group of water purveyors throughout Whatcom County on water use efficiency messaging. And so I just wanted to highlight today, most providers recommend this watering schedule based on your house number of watering every other day, skipping Monday, so that the draw on our water resources isn't quite as huge on any given day. And then there's also rebates available through the Whatcom Water Alliance, $75 for water sense irrigation controllers. So you can set this up. It's based on either weather data or soil moisture data. And then you can set up your system and not think about it again. And that kind of lowers that cost of entry. There's also rebates for water efficient toilets, washers, dishwashers. Maintaining septic systems. If you're living in the city, you might not have to worry about this, but if you're living in rural areas, or even some city lots are on septic systems, and that's what's taking care of your human waste. When those are malfunctioning, that can be a lot of poop in the water that has a lot of human pathogens because it's coming from humans. So Whatcom County offers up to $500 rebates for septic evaluation, equipment installation, repair, or pumping. And if you live in the city of Linden and you're on a septic system, they're currently waiving the fee to connect to sewer, so that it's less expensive to then connect and then not have to worry about that maintenance schedule any longer. If you have livestock, so again, if you're living rurally, or even if you've got some backyard cuties like me, it's really important to think about how you're managing that animal waste, because just like dogs or humans, they poop too, and that poop has fecal coliform bacteria. So we offer $4,500 grants for manure storage, heavy use area protection, roof runoff structures, and access lanes. We also have farm planners on staff that can provide free technical assistance and help in trying to think about where your manure is flowing and how you might be able to help it. And then the county also has $500 rebates, which are now renewable as of this month, which is pretty exciting. And that's also for practices that help prevent manure runoff. And then I wanted to end with my favorite action and something that is pretty powerful, and that's planting native plants. So native plants are adapted to our Whatcom County environment. They can deal with our rain in the winter better. They can deal with our lack of rain in the summer better in general. They usually require less watering once they're established. They need less fertilizers. They help infiltrate that water that's coming down and running off much better than lawns do. They'll uptake it so then it's being filtered naturally through the ground instead of going directly into those ditches or storm drains. They also help stabilize soils, reducing erosion. That's helping with turbidity, which someone mentioned. And they also provide shade to keep those streams cool, which is an important water quality metric when we're looking at things like salmon and their survival. And so, quick plug where you get native plants. We have a native plant sale every year in March where we sell native plants, bare root, and plugs at a low cost to get them distributed out to the community. There's several native plant nurseries locally. If you live in the Birch Bay watershed or the Lake Whatcom watershed, we also have programs to convert lawns to native landscaping for free. So that's a neighborhood native landscaping program if you're in Birch Bay or outside of city limits in the Lake Whatcom watershed, and the homeowner incentive program or HIP program if you're within city limits. And then I also wanted to plug the Gardening Green course that's through the Whatcom County Extension as a great way to learn about different ways that you can garden green, including native plants. And there's also a Master Gardeners program through the Extension as well. And so just to reiterate again, the power that collective impact can happen, because when we're thinking about these really large scale challenges that we face, whether that be climate change or water pollution, sometimes it can feel like our actions are just a drop in the bucket, to use an appropriate analogy. And so when we work together and when we are doing this every day, it can add up. So last year, Whatcom CD facilitated the replacement of 112,000 square feet of lawn into native landscaping, and that's estimated to infiltrate almost 200,000 more gallons of water per year. So that's just one agency working with about 10 homeowners in 1 year, and that's going to have added impacts for every year going forward. And so there's also actions that we can take as a community, that we can also work together and work in some of our public spaces, as well as just kind of feel that hope of all working together and knowing that other people care. And so part of that is being a volunteer. We have a lot of volunteer opportunities. Most of the organizations that spoke today, as well as others across the county, have volunteer opportunities. We host riparian plantings in the spring and fall with Nooksack Salmon Enhancement Association and the Whatcom Land Trust, as well as invasive species removal along important creeks and streams. This summer, we're going to be having storm drain marking work parties in the cities of Linden and Ferndale. And so those, you've probably seen them, the little circle markers that basically remind people every day when they're going past them that that storm drain connects to their local stream. And then the next event coming up is going to be our July 5th beach cleanup, which we do in Birch Bay every year. Last year, we removed 6 tons of trash in 1 day with the help of volunteers. And we would love more volunteers to do that again this year. And other actions you can do, something like becoming an ambassador. Whatcom County has a great pet waste program with pet waste ambassadors. When you talk about the actions that you take, you normalize that behavior and you make it easier for other people to see how they can implement it in their own lives. Because we have a lot of other things to worry about in our day-to-day life, like getting food on the table and keeping a roof over our heads. And sometimes one more action can just feel like too much. But when we see other people doing it and we talk about how we do it, it makes it feel less onerous and like less of a lift. And then supporting community water quality efforts, whether that's the organizations that we're talking today or other organizations that are happening around the county. We've talked a lot about how we monitor some things and we do our best to do different places, but there's so much more that we can learn and so much more that we don't know yet or would love to know more about, or so many actions that just take more resources. And so thinking about that when you're thinking about how and where to support, where to spend your time, water is important. And so I wanted to close out with my favorite poster child for water quality and cumulative impacts of pollution, as well as collective action. I can speak. And that's the oyster. So it's been mentioned a couple different times. We have some pretty amazing shellfish areas here in Whatcom County. And it's been quite a journey of closures and opens, and all of that has to do with cumulative pollution and then collective actions working together to reverse that. And so they're kind of our little canary in the coal mine of how much bacteria is out there, and if it's safe or not safe. And when we keep that in mind and how they're at the end of the line, right? That's where all of the water is going, is back out into the bay. And we've had a lot of successes with our oysters over the years. I can't name them off the top of my head, especially not with notes, but I know Ingrid and James also have seen kind of that journey. So if you have any questions, my contact info is up there. I'm Alexi Guddal, Education Outreach Specialist at Whatcom CD. I also included links to our website, our Instagram and Facebook handles, so you can follow us to learn about different events that are going on. And that QR code is to our e-news, which there's also linked in the PowerPoint slide, where we send out monthly about different conservation tips as well as events that are coming up. That's what I've got. All right.
Thank you so much to all of our presenters this evening. Really appreciate you sharing your expertise.
Sharon.
Yeah, we could do that. Stop sharing. Thank you. And knowledge with us. So we're gonna try this funny dance of taking questions from within the room, and also interspersing that with questions that are coming in online. So I thought that what would be nice would be to have all of our presenters sit in the chairs up front so that we can see you all, and then we'll have some time for a Q&A. So folks who are in the room, and I'm going to be dancing between the computer and paying attention to you all. So who has a question?
You guys do any monitoring in Lake Whatcom? I saw just today they came out on Whatcom Watch, but I didn't read it. So over like 20 years, you know, Lake Whatcom's watershed health.
Yeah, I'll take that to start if anyone else wants to chime in. So there's extensive monitoring of Lake Whatcom, really primarily managed by the Western Washington Institute for Watershed Studies and the City of Bellingham, Whatcom County, and Lake Whatcom Water and Sewer District support that work through their collective Lake Whatcom Management Program. And of course, what did you have more? What was the other part of the question?
Well, just because I read every year, and it just seems to me it hasn't really improved. It's our water, right, for Bellingham. And so when I read it, I see boats on the lake, and you know, as you say, there's a lot of stormwater runoff. I saw people washing cars and going. My friend lives right on the lake at Donovan area. And, you know, they're like saying it's really hard. So that's what I'm just, you know, they just live there, but you're the scientist. So I thought maybe you'd have more in, say, over 20 years. It has improved. It stayed the same. the health of the lake.
Yeah. So I would recommend, so I can't speak to I don't know if anyone here can speak to that specifically. Generally speaking, yes, it's a win that the water quality isn't getting worse necessarily, but definitely understood there are water quality challenges with Lake Whatcom, and you can't turn that. So for those that don't know, the primary pollutant of concern is phosphorus going into Lake Whatcom, which then generates algae growth and the eutrophication process. We don't have enough dissolved oxygen in Lake Whatcom. And then there's other concerns around it, other potential contaminants going into drinking water. So I would recommend going to the Lake Whatcom Management Program website and the Institute for Watershed Studies website and poking around there and seeing are you familiar with that?
No, I read, like I said,
Yeah.
once a year,
Yeah.
but it just, from what I've understood, but maybe, I don't know if I'll really take the time to
Yes.
go, like I came here and thought if I heard it, I'll be, I
Yeah.
like to hear oral versus,
Yes.
researching.
Does anyone have anything to add to that?
Yeah, so, in addition to the ongoing monitoring, it's pretty routine every month, and that's how we know how, it's kind of the health status overall of how the lake is doing. We also have some toxics monitoring. Started really with mercury, and Department of Ecology does cyclical monitoring every year, and they're starting to incorporate the PFAS component as well, and they're monitoring fish tissue. So it's taking, you might take a water quality sample that tells you something, but also the critters that live in the lake, they tell us quite a bit as well. I know that goes on in lake, and the USGS collects data. Some of that's contracted. And those could be special studies that the USGS has done, but it doesn't always relate to the health of the water quality or the health of the lake. And then there's also watershed monitoring above beyond that. One of the slides I showed there are some little pink dots there where watershed health monitoring occurs, and that's just telling us what's going into the lake and how healthy that system is. And we might collect like that nutrient data as well. And that's a long-term snapshot in time that repeat monitoring will help us understand changes.
And I just wanted to add, if you don't.
Also there's beach monitoring during the summer for fecal bacteria and harmful algal bloom monitoring as well. But there's quite a bit. So go ahead, chime in.
To my knowledge, we're not, like, my organization is not part of the monitoring of Lake Whatcom, but just like if you've ever seen a topographic map of Lake Whatcom, it's pretty unique as opposed to a lot of our other waterways where it's a giant bowl and most of the water is coming from rain. And so that watershed in specific, the actions of homeowners, especially when it comes to phosphorus with how we're treating our yards and gardens can have a pretty big impact on our water quality overall. So keeping that in mind when we are looking at Lake Whatcom.
I'm seeing that Dory Belisle online has her hand up.
Hi,
Would you like
thank
to
you.
unmute yourself? Yeah.
It's nice to see you all again. I have a question for James. As you showed the map of the lowland streams and they were all in red, I was very disappointed because we've done so much work in the county to reach out to landowners. So my question to you is, are we getting better in our lowland streams, and how do we get off the 303D list?
Well, those pollution control plans, and this is a really long story. I'd love to talk with you more about it, but I showed the most recent water quality assessment that Ecology did. Some of those red lines I advocated should be orange.
Oh, good.
And that means that they have, and so to get off that 303D list, you have to have those watershed plans in place. And so it would be the color of orange. So it's got a total maximum daily load study on it. So that's just speaking to getting off the 303D list, having that plan in place. And some of those plans can help leverage funds and promote the importance of doing the work in the watershed. And one question is meeting that water quality standard. That's one way of understanding if we are improving. Another way to go about doing it is doing a statistical trend analysis. And in some instances, there are areas that are improving. And I did a trend analysis for the Drayton Harbor watershed fairly recently using what data I think some of these groups here that presented have collected. And it's just focusing on bacteria. And in every single, I forget, maybe 40 different sampling locations for the past 10 years, none of the conditions were getting worse. They weren't degrading. Some of them were improving. So the work we have done is making a difference, but I agree we do have a lot of red lines out there that we got to deal with.
I have just one more question because I'm partial to the 10 Mile Creek. Is that one getting better? Should that be an orange?
Oh, let's see. I don't know. I should probably check it out. And if you're interested in, do you have any particular pollutant? We might have data on that.
No, I've just worked in that watershed and a lot of work with landowners, and I was just hoping that we could at least be orange.
All right. Well, thanks for your work. I think there's some orange out there when it comes to bacteria pollution.
Okay.
And I've heard of your group, and we appreciate your work.
Dory,
Thank you.
if you go to the Whatcom County Public Works water quality website, you can, the work that Resources is helping collect that data still, and we're still publishing water quality reports for the bacteria data for 10 Mile. So that would be you could go read the most latest report. Might give you some ideas.
Okay, thank you.
Do we have another question in the room?
I was just gonna chime in and say that if you go to the Whatcom Clean Water Program annual report, 10 Mile Creek actually does show decreasing fecal bacteria levels over the past, 10 years of data that we have for that site, for those things. So
Did you hear that, Dory?
Yes, I wrote it down. Thank you.
Yes, Cynthia. Yeah.
Do we have another question in the room?
Just a quick one. I'm curious about the AFFF stuff that they use in firefighting. Because it has so much PFAS, is there any movement to ban it, outlaw it, change it, be at risk?
Yeah, they've already switched over in Bellingham.
So this is like a past
Yeah,
thing.
yeah, to Novo Pool, is that what it's called? Yeah. So it's part of the mystery, and what we're trying to figure out is when they stopped using it, but they were learning that they stored it still in facilities because we found out that it was bad, but then what do we do with it? And there was only certain facilities that would actually destroy it. So it was being stored locally, but then stored somewhere else. So there's a lot of information that we're trying to figure out with timelines and the localities of this AFFF on the landscape.
Mm-hmm.
And we're working that out right now. But yeah, no one that we know of now in the city of Bellingham uses AFFF foam anymore.
What about the rest of the state and the rest of the country? Yeah.
Well, I know Washington State's on the same trajectory because of the PFAS chemical action plan is really directing that work.
Mm-hmm.
My guess is different municipalities have been on slightly different timelines, but as a state, we're all migrating away from using that and destroying what we have.
Good.
Has no eastern state or two banned it?
Eastern
East
United
Coast.
States or Eastern?
East Coast.
Oh, I don't know. I haven't been following it on the federal level as well.
Has the
We have
phone
Could I interject with a related question from online?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So there was a question about protective actions that you mentioned that you were working with the city and other organizations on these results, and there was a question about what are the protective actions that can come out of that work.
Specifically, in Squalicum Creek anyway, we recommend not swimming in at all. And if you do swim, that you should shower afterward. places like Michigan have been addressing these issues, and they do actually have some guidance on signage that we're looking at. But at this point, the amount of PFAS found in the creeks appears to not be of a huge concern if you wash it off your body after swimming. But then again, the real concern is the ingestion, because PFOS, which is the one we're finding a really high level, is dangerous at a 4 part per trillion level, which we exceed every time we've sampled it. It has exceeded that limit. So it's really important that people and pets don't drink that water.
I think the question was really more pertaining towards regulations or some other enforcement action that cities or others would take.
Well, we're working in the process to remove PFAS from different products. So that chemical action plan is going through different products and prioritizing which products have it and slowly finding replacements for them as they can. Talking to the fire departments, it's not used in the triple or in the AFFF anymore, but they still have their uniforms still have PFAS in them. So they are personally getting exposed to it. We learned that the city of Vancouver has recently just replaced all of their firefighting gear with PFAS-free uniforms, but they don't have the funds right now in Bellingham to do that, but that's in the works. And we also did learn that they've had some workplace fatalities associated with likely the PFAS in their uniforms or working with it. So it's a slow process. It's a complicated process, but it's so far it's been worked in a systematic way. We're trying to find the worst case scenarios and get it removed.
Thank you. And I had cut you off. You had
Oh, that's okay. Yeah, no, I was just wondering if the phone situation had gotten better, like since they stopped using the chemicals at the fire department, or if we had, sounds like we haven't really noticed much of a change.
Yeah, we don't have enough data really to know that. And then that precipitous drop between the 2 years, that could be from a variety of factors. Yeah, we just really don't have enough data. And one of the things we're learning, we thought that the PFAS would be coming from the surface, and that's why we were targeting those fall flush events. But when the Department of Ecology sampled, they actually focused on low flow event, and their sample was double ours. And so they got a more concentrated sample. So now we're thinking, oh, it's probably in the groundwater. So we're just learning as we're testing.
I have another question from online. Sorry. So this is from Otto Pointer, and he has a question for James, wondering about Ecology, follow up on an ERTS violations by Semiahmo's golf course fertilizer pollution into Drayton Harbor. I don't know if you're
I'm not aware of it.
familiar. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
You had a question?
Yeah, so on the topic of looking at other potential areas where you could find that PFAS, have you been like considering like looking at sediment samples at all for like upper levels, like the first couple of centimeters, like creek beds and stuff like that, to see if you can like find any historical record with any of that contamination involved?
Yeah, ideally, if we, particularly at this fire training facility, this is all like super new, like literally within the last couple of weeks. So we, our first step is there is actually a retention pond there that we would like to sample. And then there's a ditch coming below this facility that we would also like to sample. And if that leads us to that area, I think then doing some sediment samples would be good. And certainly more groundwater samples would be really helpful. But yeah, more sampling in general. Sampling's not cheap. So that's a limiting factor.
I have another question from online. This is for Ingrid, I believe, from Oliver Groff. And he writes, it has recently been established that clear cutting contributes to reduced summer stream flow and causes increased temperatures in our streams. And he says many of the streams that come from commercial forest lands have temperature exceedances, and then you're off your B list.
The temperature TMDL for the South Fork Nooksack assume that commercial forestry has neutral influence over stream temperature, yet there's evidence that this assumption is invalid. Here's the question part. Is there any effort in Whatcom County to address the likely influence of commercial forestry on increase in stream temperatures in combination with reduced stream flows, particularly as it results to salmon survival that depend on cold water?
Thank you for that, Oliver. I do not know. If you want to send that, is there a way to share an email? If you send that to me as email, I could pass that on to our salmon recovery staff who might be able to answer that question.
Okay, thank you.
I'm
not sure if Oliver is still on the line, actually. So I am noticing that we're almost at time, so I think we have time for another question from the room before we wrap up. Yes.
I have one for you, James. With regard to the DOE TMDL order on Lake Whatcom, it's 10 years old. It has a 50-year life. Why so long?
I think that was, yeah, whether you say long or short, I think that was to give local jurisdictions like the county and city to find the funds to do the work, to reduce phosphorus inputs. And it could, I'm speculating that it could partially be due to the time it takes the lake to respond to reducing phosphorus inputs to the lake. So give taxpayers and give us time to wrap our heads around it. And I think the TMDL and certain activities like banning phosphorus were done before the TMDL was completed. But it does seem like a long time. Yeah.
Yeah, I won't see the end of it.
Yeah, neither will I. And it's also not a hard and fast cutoff date. Like, you may achieve it before that. And what happens in another 50 years? So it's just a general goal that it's not a legally binding regulation.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, we could do that. Yeah, I can just address it briefly. Okay. There were a couple of questions that were submitted in advance of the meeting, and Ingrid will briefly address those as well.
Yeah, so we had 4 questions submitted by Otto Pointer and the Water Planning Matters group. And I'll just briefly say that the first 2 related to critical area aquifer recharge areas and Shoreline Management Act and stream buffers is outside my area of expertise and the focus of what we talked about tonight. But I can provide some response to questions around Drayton Harbor TMDL and then monitoring and enforcement when it comes to, I think, the Whatcom Clean Water Program work. So I'm happy to follow up via email, or if you want to take a few minutes now, Cheryl,
Yeah, we could take a few minutes now.
Okay.
That would be fine, I think. Yeah.
So briefly, the question was related to Drayton Harbor. So as James worked on it, we have a new Drayton Harbor total maximum daily load that sets the limits for the amount of bacteria that can go into Drayton Harbor. And the question is, this TMDL does set substantial bacteria reductions for protecting shellfish harvesting and water quality. The question was, what are the county's numeric reduction targets by tributary or source category? What deadlines apply and what enforcement triggers will occur if monitoring measures do not achieve those reductions? So as it relates to the Whatcom counties and the Whatcom Clean Water Program's larger bacteria, water quality program, our objectives really are tied to the Ecology's, water quality standards for freshwater and the State Department of Health saltwater standards for shellfish protection. So we're looking at our data and we're analyzing it and we're looking at how we are meeting, are we meeting those water quality standards? Are we noticing trends in improvements to meet those standards? Our program does not have specific targets for specific reaches, which is a unique characteristic of the TMDL. There's no specific deadlines related to our programs coming from the TMDL, but as James pointed out, there's a 10-year timeline. Is that for like the cleanup plan component?
Yeah, it's similar to Rick's, the 50-year timeline for this TMDL. We put one out as a 10-year timeline, but we're also building off of about 15 years or more of work. And it's a different type of pollutant. So we're being really optimistic with Drayton Harbor that we will open up ultimately trying to protect those shellfish beds is the most difficult, the most stringent. It has the most stringent water quality criteria associated with it. So that is difficult, but it also means we need to address the upstream areas. So yeah, we think that we can, with all the work going on into the watershed, we do need to have more to do. But that it's not a deadline. It's a timeline goal. A difference between like a deadline would be if you have a permit, Ecology administers those. We have reissuance cycles. Those are deadlines. Permittees have deadlines to submit data or annual reports.
And then I'll briefly try to address the final question, which had to do with how does our bacteria monitoring relate to enforcement. And so the question was, when monitoring identifies reoccurring pollution, failing septics, livestock impacts, etc., what is the formal process for moving from education or voluntary action to enforcement action? And how will the public be able to track those actions? So a couple parts to that. Our water quality monitoring, really of any, well, I guess water quality monitoring just gives you're either looking at a trend or it's giving you a clue that something is going on upstream. And the work that Resources described is a perfect example of how you go hunting for the source upstream. And it's really, really difficult. So our monitoring might give us a clue that something's going on, and we'll go upstream looking for bacteria sources, similar to how Resources is looking for the PFAS source. You're unlikely to find a specific source. You might, but so we use our data to identify priority areas to do a lot of outreach and encourage voluntary actions. We work with our Whatcom Clean Water program when we do find something like a private property action that could have an impact on bacteria pollution. We do have some regulatory backstops. So we work with Department of Ecology staff. We work with Washington State Department of Ag regulating dairies. And then here at Whatcom County, Planning and Development Services regulates critical areas ordinance and what activities occur around streams and wetlands. So there is a regulatory component. It's really only used as in the most egregious, like obvious instances. There is no mechanism for where that information is available online for like our water quality monitoring data is readily available to go look online and see what's going on. But there's always a public records request option if folks want more information. And I think that's the best I have tonight to answer those questions. But thank you for the concerns and the good questions.
I just want to say thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Great.
I think we're at time, and I thank all of you.
Here.
Yeah, there's a bit.
Oh, okay, perfect.
Super. Thank you to
guys.
all of our presenters. Really appreciate it. And thank you so much for your interest.